And so my hope is to engage us in a deeper conversation about race, racism, society, and our future. But really, I also want to challenge us to understand the deeper implications of Black Lives Matter. Because many people know my work as a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. It's time for us to evolve the conversation, as we know, from one that dispels the myths and the rumors about marijuana being a menace in our society to one that reminds us about the medicine that marijuana is, the power and the ability to transform our lives. Yes. Yes. And we know that all communities love and benefit from marijuana, right? We love it. We were talking about, literally we've spoken all day about this. And we've talked about the myriad benefits, right? From the healing aspects to the aspects that deal with anxiety. We talked also about the potential, right? We talked about flow state and the ability we have to transform our very beings to perform at our optimal state. And that is, I feel, so profound, so necessary, and where I hope that we can all move.
You've just heard the co-founder of Black Lives Matter making the statement that marijuana is a crucial part of the progress of democracy and social justice in our times. You heard her make the statement that it's a necessary precondition for achieving your optimal state as a human being. Whatever that means, whatever that may mean to her, I can't imagine. Could we just pause and reflect on how ridiculous this would sound if we replaced marijuana with the name of any other sedative, with any other recreational drug, or with any other addictive drug? Because marijuana is all three. It is a sedative, it is a recreational drug, and it is an addictive drug. And it does also cause brain damage. Wouldn't it sound ridiculous if the leader of Black Lives Matter were endorsing the recreational use of opiates, of Xanax, even of alcohol, even of beer and whiskey, claiming that you needed any of these drugs in order to achieve your optimal state or in order to make progress with democracy and social justice?
Transform our very beings to perform at our optimal state.
It would sound laugh out loud hilarious. But somehow, this one particular sedative, marijuana, still has this strange halo surrounding it on the left wing. I would say, especially because of the legacy of specific African American and New World movements like Rastafarianism, the influence of Rastafarianism, yes, in Jamaica, but even more in the United States of America. I think there is a sense in which marijuana is still thought of as somehow a rebellious and revolutionary drug. And the reality is that now, with the progress of modern medical science, we know more clearly and specifically than ever that marijuana does indeed cause brain damage. Quote, "Our study demonstrates a pattern of gray matter volume changes in a group of regular cannabis users compared with a group of occasional ones." Just an interesting note, everyone who participated in the study was age 19 to age 29. So there were no effects on the brain here of old age or other cumulative habits over many years. Regular users exhibit a decrease in gray matter volume in the medial temporal cortex, temporal pole, parahippocampal gyrus, left insula, and orbitofrontal cortex. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not. Let me ask you in the audience, if I hadn't struggled to pronounce the different parts of the human brain there, do you think any of you would have just felt comfortable with marijuana causing brain damage, with marijuana causing the loss of gray matter in just some parts of the brain and not others? Was there anyone in the audience who was sitting there thinking, okay, the temporal cortex, temporal pole, that I can live with. That's no problem. But wait a minute. It causes brain damage also in the orbitofrontal cortex. Okay, forget it. I'm out. Okay, now I'm going to take this seriously, guys. Now I'm going to quit smoking marijuana. Before, the first 4 or 5 parts of the brain you mentioned being damaged by marijuana, that I was cool with, but not that last cortex. That was one cortex too many.
And I actually believe that marijuana and this cannabis industry can be one of the critical vehicles for the 21st century to help us in transforming this world so that we can have a democracy that works for all of us. I believe that we have an opportunity for us to live up to the change that we talked about. We talked about, this conference and even this convening being one that is recognizing that cannabis is a catalyst for change. And I believe that cannabis can be a catalyst for social change and social good. So that is where I will close today.
It's estimated 9% of cannabis users will develop an addiction or dependency, which is less than alcohol and nicotine. But for those who start toking as teenagers, it's about 17%.
I gotta tell you, it's a very psychological addiction. When you stop, it's some physical addictions. There's some physical, you stop sleeping, you get the chills, you get body aches, you get restless leg syndrome. Restless leg syndrome is the worst part of it, I would say. I have no patience. My temper is through the roof, and that is not like me. There's sleep is out the window. Forget about sleep. I'm not sleeping for about 3 days until my body crashes, and then I'll sleep for about 4 hours. And then that'll be my sleep for the next 3 days until I crash again. And then and food is definitely out the window. Don't want to eat food at all. Appetite is gone.
At 15, it meant everything. By the time high school was over, Vanessa Markov and her friends were smoking pot every day. Markov admits she probably wouldn't have listened to anyone's advice, but she regrets spending more than a decade of her life in a drug-induced haze.
I was extremely lethargic. I went from being an athlete to being a couch potato. As a kid, I absolutely didn't think it was addictive because no one had ever talked about it being addictive.
These changes strongly correlate with the monthly frequency of cannabis use in the 3 months before inclusion in the study. Specifically, significant gray matter atrophy can occur either with a heavy cannabis consumption independent of the age of first use or with recreational consumption that started during adolescence before the age of 18. Neuropsychopharmacology. Come on, that's a journal. Nobody can even spell the title. It's a terrible name for a journal. How are you going to sell any copies on newsstands with a title like that? Yeah, well, it's a respectable peer-reviewed journal. That's what I was quoting before, and that's what I'm interested in quoting again. Our findings corroborate several animal studies, adding evidence that the duration of exposure to cannabis is indeed associated with localized volume reduction in regions rich in CB1 receptors, correlating with the amount of cannabis used. Let me just emphasize here. Volume. It doesn't mean they're turning down the volume in the brain. It's not about sound here, okay? Localized volume reduction. That's talking about the actual shrinkage of lobes of the brain, okay? The loss of gray matter being visible as shrinking hemispheres of the brain, shall we say. Continue our quotation here. The progression of a long-term exposure to drugs toward the development of substance use disorders and addictive behaviors is often associated with deficits in decision-making. In this regard, it has been demonstrated that substance-dependent individuals and patients with VMPFC lesions exhibit similar behaviors that lead them to make similar decisions in real life, preferring choices that bring immediate benefits, even if coupled with negative consequences. All right, let's just pause. So what they're saying here is the type of brain damage they have proven marijuana to cause. It doesn't just show up in a brain scan on a computer screen down at the hospital. It's also evident in changes in human behavior, in the types of decisions people make.
15 years later, she found herself in a doctor's office pleading for help with multiple mental health issues.
I just started to have extreme panic attacks. and very high anxiety, brutal social anxiety, to the point where I had to be either drunk or high in order to really relate to people or feel comfortable in my own skin.
One day, do I want to not smoke marijuana and just be sober? Absolutely. Do I think I can? I don't know.
I mean, really, people like to disrespect my crew, but the fact is that you know my name and I don't know you.